we have been discussing the assertion that Sikhi, as it is practiced today, is no longer the Sikhi that was given to us by our gurus. It is a spirituality that stands distorted, corrupted, and tainted. Our scripture GURBANI has been distorted through Vedic and Puranic slants in interpretations and translations. Our history has been muddled in unbelievable tales of miracles called Sakhis. The general conduct of Sikhi has come to be dictated by a clergy class, and our religious practices consist primarily of those smuggled in from rejected and discarded rituals of the pre-1469 faiths. In short, Sikhi today stands as a faith that has been hijacked from its unique path and equally distinct goals. Three powerful groups conducted this hijacking, by which is meant the distorting, corrupting, and contaminating of Guru Nanak's divine spirituality. They did so by controlling our institutions, our literature, our historical narratives, and our gurdwaras, and by extension, the fate and psyche of Sikhi for a long period of 207 years from 1718 all the way until 1925. In previous videos, we have examined the role of the Udasis and Nirmalas in the hijacking of Sikhi. In today's video, we will examine the damage done to authentic Sikhi by the third group, namely the Dera Sants and Taksali Babas. Throughout the period of the Gurus from 1469 till 1708, no Sikh was ever called a Sant or referred to with the title of Sant. The history of Sikhs is replete with those who served humanity, those who sacrificed themselves, fought wars, and spread the messages of Sikhi, but not a single Sikh was ever referred to as Sant. The devoted Sikh who accompanied Guru Nanak for almost 3 decades is called Bhai Mardana. The one in whose hand the Pothi Sahib was written is called Bhai Gurdas. Sikhs who were boiled alive, sawn alive, burnt alive, crushed alive on the wheel, had their scalps removed and cut up limb by limb, are similarly called Bhai Dayala, Bhai Matidas, Bhai Satidas, Bhai Subheg Singh, Bhai Taru Singh, and Bhai Mani Singh, respectively. All Panj Pyare who took and administered the Khande Di Pahal from and to Guru Gobind Singh Ji carried the title of Bhai. Then there was Bhai Nandalal, the scholar, Bhai Bachittar Singh, the brave and courageous, and Bhai Lakshman Singh, the Shaheed. There is a philosophical reason why the word Bhai is the norm for addressing other human beings, and that reason is to preserve equality within mankind. When one human calls another Bhaiji or its feminine equivalent of Panji, the notion of equality and brotherhood of mankind comes into play. The response by the individual who is addressed as Bhai would be to address the other as Bhai too. When Guru Nanak referred to his companion as Bhai, it is expected that Mardana similarly addressed Guru Nanak as Bhai. In fact, there is no evidence whatsoever that any of our gurus wanted to be referred to as gurus, even if the lay Sikh, the common Sikh today, cannot imagine another way to refer to them. Right up till 2 centuries after the demise of the 10th Guru, one does not find a single Sikh with the title of Sant. Many Sikhs are surprised to know that the practice of conferring the title of Santa onto an ordinary mortal is the invention of the British while they acted as colonial masters of Punjab. More of this later. Let's look at the meaning of the word Santa in Gurbani first. The word Sant appears in the following 4 contexts within the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. First, for the Creator. When used such, it always appears as singular. It is used, for instance, in the verse of Guru Arjan on page 97 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Bhag hoa gur sant milaya, prab avanasi kar main paya. Meaning, I am blessed that my Guru has united me with God, Santa. Second, it is used for the Guru. When used such, it also appears as singular. It is used, for instance, in the verse of Guru Ram Das Ji on page 667 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Har ka Santa Satgur Satpurkha Jo Bole Har Har Bani. Meaning, the divine Guru Har ka Sant is creator connected Satpurkha and creator connecting Satgur, and he discourses creator related Bani, Bole Har Har Bani. In a verse on page 867 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, Guru Arjan uses the word Santa in singular as follows. Soi Santa Je Pave Ram, Sant Gobind ke Eke Kam Rahao. The phrase Soi Santa in the verse refers to Guru. My Guru, Soi Santa, is blessed Pave by the Creator Ram. In no circumstances can the above verses refer to any human entity other than the Guru himself. On page 280 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, Guru Arjan Ji provides what can be described as the most comprehensive explanation of the word Sant. Some 60 verses are composed one after another, all containing the word Sant and all defining the word Sant. In this section immediately following these verses, Guru Arjan states in the clearest of terms this verse, Manuk ki tek birthi sabjan devan ko ek hai Bhagwan. Guruji is saying that the giver is the one creator, Bhagwan or Santa, as referred to in the 60 verses before this verse, and that reliance on such giving from a human, Manuk, is completely and absolutely in vain, birthi sabjan. This verse and its placement at the end of 60 verses that discuss the concept of Sant makes it clear that Guru Arjan is not using the word Sant for a class of human beings. So that's the second meaning of the word Sant, for the Guru. Third, it is used for genuine seekers of the Creator's realization within. In this case, the usage is in the plural. The root of the word Sant is Sat, meaning the Creator who is in existence. So, the meaning of Sant is one seeking to connect with Sat, or one who possesses that sort of a mindset. In reality then, Sant in this third context, or its equivalent Santo, Santan, etc., is in the plural form and refers to us Sikhs. Sant meaning seekers of Sat, the Creator within, reflects the mindset, not labels, our Gurus want us to have. In the plural sense, therefore, the word Sant refers to ordinary Sikhs who are seekers of the Creator or who possess the mindsets that seek the Creator within. The following verse of Guru Arjan on page 621 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji is illustrative. Santo Ram Naam Nistarya, meaning O seekers of the Creator, Sikhs, the way to successful spirituality is to acquire divine virtues, Ram Nam. Fourth, the word is used to refer to a critiqued class or group of people who either proclaim themselves as Sant, add it to their names, use it as a title, label themselves as Sant, or desire to be called such by others. Gurbani critiques this group of people on the following three grounds. One, it is discriminatory because this class is saying they, as sants, are higher than the lay people. On the other hand, the accepted honorific of Pahi in Gurmat denotes equality and brotherhood of mankind. Two, it is the antithesis to the control of one's ego. Calling oneself higher than others is not spiritually sanctioned in Gurmat and in Gurbani. 3. Our gurus did not support the use of spiritual titles that were in vogue or in fashion then. Titles such as Sri 108, Chaturvedi, Vedanti, Dovedi, Trayvedi, Sri 111, etc. These titles were meant to denote how many religious books one had read of the 108 Upanishads, 18 Puranas, and the 4 Vedas. The mere reading of any kind of spiritual text, including the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, is of little value in Sikhi, as it does no more than feed one's ego. The ego relies on the basis that I have read X number of texts, Y number of times. The Gurbani injunction is to understand, accept, believe, inculcate, internalize, and eventually become the messages. Gurbani thus refers to people who call themselves Sant with a view to critique their use of the title. The term used for them is Banaras ke Thug, meaning con men posing as spiritual persons. The verse can be found on page 476 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji and reads as follows. Oye har ke sant na yakhiya Banaras ke Thug, meaning call them not sons or seekers of the omnipresent Creator as they call themselves, these conmen of Banaras. So, when we talk about the Dera Sants and Taksali Babas as the hijackers of Sikhi, we are referring to this group or this class of people who call themselves Sant, who label themselves as Sant and use the title of Sant before their names. People who have hijacked the word Sant used exclusively for the Creator and the Guru in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji for themselves. Pyareo, all those who have studied the history of colonialism are aware of the notion of divide and rule. British rule in Punjab was no exception. It is worth noting that the Sikhs of Punjab were the last nation to be colonized by the British. They occupied the rest of India and then spent almost 100 years preparing to take Punjab. The lying in wait for 1 century was to soften the ground. It was to prepare for the conquest of the brave, united, and deeply spiritual Sikhs of Punjab. From the British viewpoint, the Sikhs needed to be spiritually divided and weakened substantially before they could be defeated and conquered. The colonialists used a number of ways to divide the Sikhs. Initially, they brought in hundreds of Christian missionaries in an attempt to convert Sikhs into Christianity. The aim was to create a divide among Sikhs of the Guru and Sikhs who had converted to Christianity. But when this method did not work, the British decided to divide Sikhs among themselves. They then financed the creation and compilation of a rival Granth called the Bachittar Natak Granth. This Bachittar Natak was subsequently renamed Dasam Granth to fool the Sikh masses into thinking it was authored by Guru Gobind Singh. This Granth was expected to play its part in dividing the Sikhs between those who accepted it and those who did not. The British then engineered the corruption of the Maryada at the two Takhats located outside of Punjab and connected to the 10th Guru, namely Patna and Hazur, with the help of the Nirmalas, so that the distorted Maryada could then be used as a model to be imported into Punjab to corrupt the rest of Sikhi within Punjab. The British further helped finance a whole gamut of distorted Sikh literature. Such distorted and corrupted literature was sometimes deposited at the coveted India Office Library in London to give it status and stature. The Janam Sakhi, written by Daya Ram and Alam Chand in 1733, is case in point. This Janam Sakhi, also called the B40 Janam Sakhi, based on the number assigned to it by the London office, is replete. It is full with distorted details of Guru Nanak's life. For most of the above mentioned tactics, the British solicited the active support of the Banaras-trained Nirmalas. In return, the British assisted the Nirmalas in occupying historic major Gurdwaras by installing Nirmala high priests called Mahants. The Mahant of Gurdwara Janamasthan at Nankana Sahib, for instance, was actively supported by the British to the extent that he was allowed to keep armed thugs to exert his control. The 1925 massacre of Sikhs led by Bhai Lakshman Singh to free Nankana Sahib from the Nirmalas was conducted by armed hoodlums of this same Nirmala Mahant Narayan Das. All the above tactics were effective in damaging Sikhi, weakening the Sikhs and dividing them substantially. Nothing, however, compares to the British strategy of creating and establishing a class of spiritual disruptors and then infiltrating them into the Sikh people. This class of people would serve to destroy Sikhi to its core. They would strip Sikhi of its last remaining shred of godliness and divinity. They would transform Sikhi into a collection of worthless rituals. This group would become the hijackers of Sikhi after the Udasis and the Nirmalas. Sikhi would never be the same again. As a result of this class of people, the British labelled these hijacker groups as Sants. Beginning 1903, the British government started conferring the title of Sant onto the selected Sikhs from within the Indian Army. The army was chosen to provide the pool of Sants because it was an institution which had inculcated deep loyalty and subservience towards the colonial masters. The British expected the recipients of the award of Sant to do the bidding of the government of the day out of their sense of misplaced loyalty to the colonial masters. The first individual to be given the dubious honor of being declared a Sant by his political masters was Atar Singh of Mastuana. Other individuals to be bestowed Santship by the colonial powers included Nand Singh Kalerawala, Karam Singh Hoti Mardan, Atar Singh Redu, and Bishan Singh Kanjala. They were all assigned to their respective villages as British certified preachers of Sikhi. All sorts of miraculous stories were created about these sons and then affirmed by the British. One regular lie about Atar Singh Mastuana was that mysterious forces signed him in for duty at the barracks every day for the many years that he was physically present in the countryside preaching his brand of Sikhi. Such fake tales helped establish the status of the British Sants as godly people with godly powers. Subsequently, other British sympathizers were awarded the title of Sant. These include Bishan Singh Murala, Gurmukh Singh Kar Seva, Gurbachan Singh Pindra, Bishan Singh Kar Seva Wala, and Ishar Singh Kalera. Most of them had obtained their religious training from Hindu centers or Nirmala Akhadas at Hardwar, Rishikesh, Kanchi or Banaras, Triveni in Allahabad, Mathura, Ayodhya, Badrinath, and Rameshwaram Gaya. This group of freshly created British sons were now ready to serve the political interests of the colonial masters. With active financial and logistical support of the British colonialists in the form of well-located and adequately equipped Deras, the British created class of people would corrupt the Sikhi spirit, weaken the Sikh mind, wean the Sikh away from the spirituality of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, divide the Sikhs on the basis of their individually created self-maryadas, and ritualize Sikhi practices to its core. These sons would create their own brand of Panjapyaris and administer the Khande Di Paul, complete with self-created injunctions amongst the newly initiated for the purposes of instilling loyalty to the Deras. Ordinary baptized Sikhs would identify themselves as having taken their Khande Di Paul vows from this or that particular Dera or Taksal. The Dera sons would place a rosary or mala in the hand of a Sikh. The Udasi and Nirmala hijackers held rosaries in their own hands and put it into the hands of Guru Nanak in the fake portraits of the Guru that they created. But it will be the Dera sons who would place a mala in the hands of the ordinary but hijacked Sikh. A mala-wielding Sikh was a lesser threat to the British than a kirpan-wielding one. The Sant class would change the basanti and deep blue color of vibrancy of the Sikh to white, a color of peace and tranquility as well as a color of death. The British, of course, preferred Sikhs who were peaceful to the point of being spiritually dead. The Nirmalas had already smuggled in the bipper color of saffron into the Sikh psyche during their 2 centuries of control of Sikh Gurdwaras and institutions. Sikhs, with the exception of the Nihangs, had forsaken blue already, hence adjusting to white was easily achieved. Even then, the purely white garb was only meant for public display. In private, however, they, the sons, adorned their real garb, the Brahmanical dress and outfit. The Sant class would wean the Sikh away from the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji and thrust him into meaningless chants of these or that mantras. Sikhi, according to the Sant class, was to sit for hours in the wee hours of the night chanting away one given word or two. To establish this falsehood, they concocted stories of the British appointed sons who meditated for hours and obtained miraculous powers. A Sikh who tired himself by chanting for hours in the ambrosial hours every day was obviously a lesser threat to the British. The spiritually elevating Gurbani in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji meant for understanding and becoming the messages within it would be reduced to chanting as well. Particular shabds were dished out by the Sants to be chanted for specific purposes. Of course, such could only be achieved either by distorting the real messages of the shabd or by blinding the Sikh towards the shabd's messages altogether. Sikhs who were taught by their gurus to abide by the Creator's hukam had been reduced to begging for suffering to be eliminated from their lives through ritualistic and wasteful practices. The Sant class would turn Sikhs into vegetarians and cause them to be embroiled in wasteful debates over it. They would get so deeply entangled that they would become deaf and blind to Gurbani injunctions on the matter, such as the one from page 1289 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Mahalla Pehla, Maas Maas Kar Murkh Chagde, Gyan Dhyan Nahi Jane, Kaun Saag Kaun Maas Kahave, Kis Mein Paap Samane. Meaning, the wasteful debate over meat consumption is indulged in due to lack of enlightenment over what is meat and what is vegetable and which is sinful to consume. The Dera sons and Taksali Babas would teach the Sikh to expect miracles rather than becoming the miracle as taught by their gurus within Gurbani. The Dera sons and Taksali Babas transformed Sikhs into becoming slaves of the fake miracle phenomena, expecting their Dera Sant approved chants and prayers to create miracles in their lives for them. The Sant class and Taksali Babas would turn Sikhs into worshippers of Dehdharees, ordinary mortals who claimed they were embodiments of the physical guru or worse, embodiments of God himself. These sons placed themselves on par with our gurus. Sikhs would worship them, believing that they were gurus or God reincarnate, or that at the very least they were intermediaries between the Sikh and their creator. From being taught to never bow their heads to any entity other than the Shabd Guru, Sikhs were turned into herds of sheep lining up to bow at the feet of conmen who shamelessly looted vast amounts of hard-earned money and material offered by ordinary Sikhs, but labelled themselves as sons. The Dera sons and Taksali Babas would inculcate a vast variety of rituals and deviant beliefs into the Sikh psyche. Sangrand, Purnamashi, Diwali disguised as Bandi Chhod, varieties of parts, Akhand part, Sampad part, Sahaj part, etc., performance of artis, burning of incense and oil lamps, image worship, endless offerings and prayers. The Dera sons and Taksali Babas created a false god for the Sikh. The Sant concocted god was one who sat up in the heavens and accepted bribes to do things for the Sikh through prayers and rituals ordained by the Sant. The Dera sons and Taksali Babas positioned themselves as intermediaries between the Sikh and this false corruptible god. The Dera sons and Taksali Babas created, inculcated, and maintained the loyalty of their follower chelas through their self-embellished Khande Di Paul ceremony. As stated above, each Dera Sant had his own Panch Pyaras, his own protocols for the ceremony, and set his own maryada of do and don'ts for his chelas. This was a clever way of keeping their chelas loyal, since Sikhs were made to believe that the Panch Pyare represented the 10th Guru. In reality, though, the Panch Pyare were propagating the divisive agenda of the Deras, Taksals, and their colonial masters. The Sikh masses were encouraged to get into a win-win deal with the Sant class. The Sikh toiled earnestly to earn a living, while the Sant toiled intensely through chants and meditations to become spiritual. The deal was simple. The Sikh transferred part of his temporal earnings to the Sant, and in return the Sant transferred part of his spirituality to the Sikh. The deal was necessary because the Sant spent his entire day performing spirituality for the Sikh and was thus unable to earn a living for himself. The deal sounded great, even if it went absolutely and totally against the most basic principle of Sikhi. Apan hathi apana, ape hi kaj sawariye. What was essentially a spirituality of the self, by the self, for the self, as advocated by our gurus, was turned into a spirituality on behalf, spirituality for a fee, and spirituality through human intermediaries by the Sant class. In short, the Sant class would hollow out Sikhi from the inside out. The spiritually elevated and creator-connected Sikh would be turned into a ritual-conducting, meaningless mantra-chanting and offerings-making slave of the Dera Sants and Taksali Babas. The Sikh of the Dera would be one who saw his spirituality in the display of his outward symbols, the color of his turban, the volume of his chants, the loyalty to the Sant who had become his true guru. In a short span of about 50 years, the Deras would come to represent mainstream Sikhi, being supported by the British in terms of material and by the Nirmalas in terms of religious dogma. These Deras would grow exponentially in terms of followers, in terms of financial clout, and in terms of influence. The Dera Sants would thus serve the objective and goals of the British in severely undermining the Sikh spirit that was grounded and rooted in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. They succeeded in eventually subduing the soul of the Sikhs for the purposes of subjugating Sikhs to the colonial masters. The situation would not repair itself upon the departure of the British from Punjab and from India. Successive governments of independent India and Punjab, including the Akali Dal, would continue to use the Deras and Taksals for the purposes of winning elections, because by now Sikhs attending Deras vastly outnumbered genuine Sikhs. Support for the Deras by the corrupt politicians translated into votes in the system of defective democracy that relied on vote buying that was rampant in the politics of Punjab. During the Gurdwara reform movement led by the Singh Sabha of the 1920s, a vast majority of historic Sikh Gurdwaras were freed from Nirmala and Mahant control. The result was that virtually all the Nirmalas who were thrown out of Sikh Gurdwaras moved into leadership positions of existing Deras. Some Nirmalas set up new Deras. The outcome was that Deras became the permanent centers for the Nirmalas and for Nirmala thought. Their Mahants simply transformed themselves into modern day Sants. Deras and Dera Sants have since grown exponentially. Punjab has approximately 13,000 villages. Historian Dr. Hijacking Singh Dhillon estimates that there are 16,000 Deras in that state of 13,000 villages. Most Deras would split into 2 or 3 or 4 after a fight over who succeeds the dead Sant. Others grow branches all over the world, often with political help and hefty contributions from wealthy Sikhs abroad. As a result, the Dera and their sons and Babas have become the biggest force of spiritual corruption and distortion of Sikhi in modern times. They are thus the current and most powerful hijackers of Sikhi faith. These hijackers are well organized. The Sant Samaj is the name of the organization that is comprised of Dera Sants. It functions as a pressure group to force Sikh institutions such as SGPC and Akal Takht to accede to their demands. The Sant Samaj has a hand in getting Sikhs excommunicated, especially those who are bent on exposing the ugly realities of Deras and Taksals. From its humble but corrupt beginnings as agents of the British colonial masters created to corrupt Sikhi and weaken Sikhs, the Sant class has come a long way to become the ultimate and most powerful hijacker group of Sikhi as it stands today. The next video will look at the hijacked state of Sikhi as it exists today, a state where the victims have themselves become the wrongdoers, a state where the hijacked have themselves become the hijackers. Please continue to join me in this journey of discovery.